So, me and you have been having some conversations about this and everything that's been happening since last week. Kanye's interview with Drink Champs on Tuesday. I watched part one many times. I watched it twice. I watched part two on Thursday. I watched that once. Want to open up the floor first and just kind of give you opportunity to let's talk about just a recap. So anybody that's joining right now can kind of understand where we stand on both issues, because obviously we have like contrasting opinions and we're very similar people. So that was really shocking at first when we were just like, oh yeah, like we really not aligned on what our reaction to this was. So
a good amount of things. Like I feel like we're aligned on a few things. There's three things. You gave me bullets that you disagreed with, and they're not, they're very surface, so I still don't know exactly how deep our disagreement lies. So I wouldn't say that my point here, especially on your end, I mean, I can't speak for yourself, is to convince you that you're wrong and I'm right. It's more just like, okay, that's your perspective. Okay, this is my perspective on this topic.
All right, so I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, correct. So I think, especially when it comes to conversations, debates, especially online, people are always looking to be right or wrong, but it should be the pursuit of, some type of discourse so people can explore both sides or multiple sides of a particular topic. So even for like the Kanye interview, there's a lot of points raised, and this is not entirely just about Kanye. It's mostly about the points he raised.
Right.
And our comments on that and like our take on them as well. So it's not really a Kanye conversation. Like, is he insane or not? It's mostly like, okay, he said this. What are your thoughts on this topic? Because it is relevant to what we're going through today.
Because he is a cultural icon, and I think a lot of people, he might realize like the weight that his words and his commentary has. I think sometimes he minimizes like what his actual influence is. Like he'll talk a lot about like his influence on music and fashion, and the culture that is, like pop culture, hip hop culture, whatever the case may be. But a lot of our society right now is driven by celebrity and what celebrities have to say. And for better or for worse, a lot of the times we got a lot of people that are younger, Gen Z, millennials, whatever, they lean heavily on what the opinions of celebrities and they latch onto it. So the ones that they really love, and there's that fanboyism that really is tied to that, you'll find some people just kind of like basing their entire lives and their opinions based on what their favorite rapper says or their favorite celebrity or their favorite artist, whatever that is. So So what were your major takeaways? What was like the walkaway moment? How did you feel about the interview? What do you think was the most insightful piece?
So one thing you mentioned, you think that he undermines or he underestimates his influence. I think he knows he's very influential. He says it all the time. He knows whenever he says something, he's very like he wants it to be like known. Like when he talks, you can see that he's trying to search for words that are going to stick and impact people in a certain way. Like he's very intentional. That was like what it contrasted from like his previous interviews, like the one he did on like Rogan compared to the one that he did with like Drink Champs. It felt like this one flowed a lot easier for him. And for the first one, for the first one, I really liked it. I felt like he was a little more like himself and he was more relaxed. The second one, you can tell like the liquor and the weed was hitting hard. Like it was just like it was downhill from there.
Yeah.
And it was very hard to follow because he was like really taking you through a maze just to like drive home a point. And then the point would be there, but sometimes you'll just be so fatigued from like the rant that he was going through and like the maze that you'll kind of lose it. And then it doesn't help that Nori isn't a good interviewer at all, and he just is confused and he doesn't know what the fuck is going on half the time. And then he'll just start clapping, and Kanye's like, "No, you don't gotta clap for that yet. Like I'm not done." So I did enjoy the interview, and one of the most powerful parts of the interview was when he was talking about like trying to cancel like Travis Scott or himself or Dave Chappelle from their own culture, right? So it's just like, how can you cancel me from my own culture? I built this shit. So it doesn't really make much sense for you to do that. Then also some points that we're going to get into, like the ones that we agreed on and disagreed on. I felt like it was a really open conversation, and I like that it didn't feel like he was trying to be something or be performative in some type of way. Like, I know that he did his Sunday service and he found God and everything else like that, and he's like really touching his Christian roots. And he's saying, "Oh, I'm not going to curse, I'm not going to drink or do X, Y, Z anymore." But then he was doing that on Drink Champs, like it was like right back. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, if that was a facade or something, great. Like, I just want to see like what your thoughts on who you are. So, what were your thoughts on that?
So I walked into the entire interview when I first started watching it, and I expected myself to like really dig into Kanye, because I think in the past I've been more critical of him, especially just like around, like I follow politics a lot, right? So his politics have always been like a thorn in my side. So like I've always been like very triggered by some of the things that he says, because I watch him and I'm like, here's this black man that is a billionaire, and I feel like sometimes I'm like, yo, dude, you're being used as a prop by other people. And he sometimes has this, I would say, this mentality that he feels like he's outside the matrix in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he realizes that he's part of it. Like he's a piece of it. There's still people that are pushing his buttons, kind of telling him to go one way or the other. But I didn't want, like for one particular interview, I made a conscious decision not to judge and critique Kanye as a person, but just listen to everything that he had to say. So I spent more time trying to understand what he was saying and the perspective that he was coming from. Even like the point that you just mentioned about like his Christianity and like his faith and things like that, and how he's like, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to stop doing smoking, do all these different things. And he was doing that on the show. I didn't want to even dive into like critiquing him, because as Christian or whatever, they're always going to be flawed. He said one thing during the interview. He was like, I'm a human being, I'm going to make mistakes. Yep. So I thought that was kind of like a key moment for me when I was watching it. I was just like, all right, I'm gonna lay off him, and I'm just gonna talk. I'm just gonna listen to what he has to say and his opinions and his beliefs. And I actually found myself agreeing with more of what he had to say than some of the other things that he was saying. But the parts that I felt strongly about were the ones that I sent you.
Okay. So you mean the things you felt strongly about that you disagreed with?
That I disagree with. Yeah. The things that he talked about that I agreed with, I was like, all right, cool. I think he can expand on that more. I don't think he was able to really drive home the point, because like you said, he searches for words. Like he's searching for those, like that buzzword, that hit, that saying that people are gonna like say like, oh, that was dope, or that was deep, or whatever, and they walk away with it, and they're like, all right, cool, I heard something cool. But I think if you really look under the surface and you dig deeper to that, underneath that, it's bigger than, like the Drake beef. It's bigger than the Jay Prince stuff. It's bigger than all like the Balmain and the Virgil commentary and all these other things, like how I'm going after like Talib and everything like that. When you really look at the core of where that information is coming from, you really get a better sense of who he is as a person and as a human being.
Absolutely. And one thing to even know, I've been a Kanye fan since he came out in 2002, 2003. I can tell you right now, that man never changed. He's he's had that energy. He's been that person forever. It's just, we didn't
old Kanye versus new Kanye. You don't believe that?
No, people use that, but like when you watch other interviews in the past and stuff like that, he's been like that. He's been a little, not crazy, but like he's been that like dude who's gonna say something outrageous or wants people to like stick to what he's saying, and like you can tell that like he's very passionate about it, especially when an old interview when he was talking about like as hip hop is like really homophobic. Like that was huge to say that back in like 2004, and people looked at him like he was crazy, right? But like now, if you look at it now, people are having those conversations 10, 15 years later, and it's just like, was he wrong? And that's why I think like even with this interview, a lot of people may still see him as like this crazy dude, but if you look at if you mine it for the nuggets that he was saying, you'll see that those things are going to be coming true very soon or in the near future. But yeah, but we can get into, the points that you disagree about or disagree with, and then we can kind of talk about it from that standpoint.
So you brought it up like the very first part about like people saying like he's always been crazy. So one of the sayings that he said, and then Nori was over here clapping about that. He had this this quotable that he dropped. He said, "The declaration of insanity is censorship and control."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that statement is just part of like an overall like conversation about free speech. It's talking about social media. It's talking about algorithms and like the fact that there's confirmation bias, like in everything that we basically interact with this app that we're on right now. Like there's the way that information is kind of passed and how it's controlled. I disagree with the point that he said there, because I think Kanye has I think his vision in saying that, or his belief in saying that, is that free speech should be allowed without consequence. And I think there are consequences for free speech.
Absolutely.
And I know he feels that way because when Nori called him out about the shadow banning, how he was like, "Yo, I spoke to Dorsey," and like Kanye was like, "I spoke to Dorsey," and was like, "Why'd you shadow ban me?" And Dorsey was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, man. I don't see this," right? And Nori was like, "Yeah, but you was kind of going crazy. Like you was talking crazy on Twitter." And Kanye was like, "But like, did that deserve me being shadow banned? Well, should I have been shadow banned for like talking like that?" Mm-hmm. So I think censorship it's wrong in the sense that you shouldn't be censoring people when they're sharing ideas, but when they're sharing dangerous ideas, you have to put people in check. And I think Kanye doesn't agree with that. That's just my.
Okay, so this is a greater question. This begs a greater question, because you said something that said dangerous ideas. So a dangerous idea, what could be constituted as a dangerous idea? Who defines that, right? So when you're talking about these platforms, you can look at Twitter and Facebook and who runs them. It's just like their politics may be aligned to a certain way, and they may say that, you know what you're saying right now is pretty dangerous because it goes against what we're talking about, what we believe in, right? As a company, right? Where we want to align at. But when you look at a company like Facebook or Twitter, it's so humongous. There's so many people on it. It's essentially like a town square. So it's just like, who's policing the speech and saying that this needs to be censored because it's dangerous? The issue with that is just we don't really have a clear insight in what's dangerous and what's not. Like, I can tell you what's dangerous if you're doxing someone, right? If you're putting out their information saying Steve Glatmore lives at 956th Street and he's a homophobe, we should go burn his house down. Yeah, that's inciting like a riot. That's putting out personal information about someone. You need to protect that person from that standpoint. But if someone has like a thought that says like, hey, I don't think we should have a two-party system. I think we should have a three-party system during an election, which has happened. I remember this happened with a guy named like forgot his name. His brother's Eric Weinstein, but they wanted to have like a third-party option because they thought Trump and Biden sucked. And then Twitter ended up banning their page. And they said, "Why'd you ban our page?" And they said something like, "Oh, you're using bots." But then they did like a third-party review and said you weren't even using any bots to promote this idea. But that was viewed as a dangerous idea, and Twitter felt like we should censor you because that's dangerous, right? In another vein, and it's so crazy because like Twitter's so wild west at times. I would think it's dangerous because a kid can create a Twitter page, right? And then go look at the most violent and look at the most like sexual images of like pornography out there on Twitter, but that's not censored at all. Like that's just left open, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one aspect of just like dangerous censorship that I think like when we use that term, we have to understand who's actually creating these particular rules around that, and why should those be instituted, and should they be clearer so people understand, okay, if I write this, I'm going to get banned, or is this just going to be a person-to-person thing? Another aspect of when he said declaration of insanity is like a form of control, I do see it as a form of control in a way that, well, if you're fucking crazy, you're fucking crazy. I don't even like the term crazy. Like if you're having like a psychotic break or something like that, and you're not making sense, or maybe you're experiencing like illusions of grandeur, you're schizophrenic or something like that. Yeah, then you need help, right? We
Right.
shouldn't. We should listen to that as a cry for help. We shouldn't just silence or anything. But even Dave Chappelle, when he was going through what he is going through with Comedy Central, they were saying like, "Yo, this man is on crack. This man is crazy." Blah blah blah. He walked away, and that's just because he walked away from what was it, like $45 million.
It was more than that, I think. Yeah, it
He
was like,
exactly. He walked away from more than that, and then people just cut him to the side and said, "You know what? He's crazy because he didn't take that money, even though he is standing up for his values and being true to himself." Fast forward years later, he's on stage now. He makes that money back, and he's telling the Me Too movement, "Look, I moved. I knew how toxic this environment was. You guys called me crazy. I knew it was crazy back in 2004, 2005, and you guys said I was smoking crack. But now everybody looks to look at the swamp and say that the swamp is like, let's say that the swamp is dirty. It's like, I've been told you the swamp is terrible. You never drained it, and now people are scrambling and figuring out what we need to do. You're 15 years late." So there's like two aspects of that. I do think you can't just say wild shit like what Trump did with the January 16th.
January 6th, the riot, yeah.
January 6th. That, if you incite a riot in some type of way and they find that you do that, yeah, you should be censored. I do think that's dangerous because you can actually get people hurt. Censorship
Right.
as well. If you scream out like there's a bomb in an assembly hall, that's censorship of free speech. So I do think that is needed in some cases. I said a mouthful, so you let me know where you want to jump in.
So you bring up a good point, and some people were commenting as well, and they were saying, you know, like who determines what's dangerous? Like who defines what is dangerous because it's so subjective. I think dangerous ideas only become dangerous when you realize that people are willing to manipulate them to actually put them into action. Like it's fine to like put like you having like the free flowing conversation. You're talking about certain things. There's a dialogue. People are open to hearing a different side and being changed and perspectives being changed.
Mm-hmm.
That is fine, right? But when you look in the context of what we would like, what history might define, like who is crazy or who's insane, like Kanye talked about Hitler, like during the interview. Hitler was one of those people that were clinically insane. Like, but no one really acted on, if you look back at World War II, Hitler was talking about the master race and exterminating Jews and conquering Europe and doing all these other things.
Yeah.
But when he was doing that just within Germany, no one acted. No one did anything. You had prime ministers of England were visiting the country. They flew into the country. Two different like leaders in the UK flew over to Germany to talk to Hitler, and they had conversations. They had meetings with him, and they walked away saying, "It was like, nah, he's fine." Like all we needed was a promise that he was not going to expand and try to invade other countries. And after I think it was Churchill, his last meeting with Hitler, like a couple like weeks later, Blitzkrieg, flies over, bombs like London, right? So you have people who have dangerous ideas that are willing to enact them. Like, so you talk about like the Hitler, you talk about the Jim Jones, you talk about King Leopold, you think about all these these figures like Mao, like you talk about these figures in history that have dangerous ideas and they say it. Like you hear the rhetoric and you're like, hey, I'm going to act on this, right? Or I'm going to incite people to act on this because their purpose is not to engage in dialogue. Their purpose is to, like you said, incite a riot. It's to create power. It's to create division because that's where like the check needs to kind of happen. Like you talked about Trump and the January 6th riot. Huge thing that happened. I've never seen that happen in the 35 years that I've lived in this country. Like I've been alive, you know, like you've never seen that happen in the United States. But you hear that rhetoric and it was building up. You know, like that was his last year of Trump's presidency. From the beginning of his presidency, 4 years, like prior to that, people were calling him out and saying like, yo, your rhetoric is dangerous. You got people riled up that actually believe some of these things that are racist or are divisive or, you know, like things that people will take out like that context and fire themselves up to actually go and act on it. Like you don't have a Dylan Roof, like that 14, 15-year-old kid going into a church and killing like 9 people in like a Sunday, like a Bible study, if he's not reading comments or commentary on Reddit, and we're not checking that, right? Even Facebook, like I know you mentioned social media and Twitter. Facebook got in trouble for the whistleblower, like coming out like a couple weeks ago and saying like, look, Facebook's not doing enough to protect people from this activity that's happening on their platform. So when there's like genocide that's happening halfway around the world in like Burma, like Myanmar, or whatever, like Malaysia, all these other different places, that's free speech. But there needs to be levels of, what I'm saying, there needs to be levels of protection. Like there needs to be people that are checking, looking at this and saying like, look, this poses a threat. So that's what I mean by dangerous. So I think Kanye doesn't like, he might realize it, or maybe he doesn't realize that he can easily be one of those individuals that his words can be misconstrued, or his intent can be misconstrued, and be a part of that. Like people can take his context, the things that he says out of context, and push things forward. He even said things during the interview that I was just like, look, like he was talking about Margaret Sanger and the KKK and like abortion, his kind of like pro-life stance. And I was thinking about that. I was just like, all right, I understand the context of Kanye saying this because his mother could have aborted him, and he's like, but she didn't. I wouldn't exist if she didn't make that decision. So I'm convicted based off of, my convictions are based off of her making that decision. Therefore, I'm going to create an orphanage because for people who feel like they don't have a choice, like they can have that baby or something like that. But I have to go back.
But we'll talk about that. I think you may want to. Did you disagree with that statement as well? Because I disagree with that statement he made.
What statement?
About the orphanages and like the Margaret Sanger and stuff like that, like the abortion stuff.
So I had to go back.
If it's too dirty to touch.
What?
If it's too dirty to touch, we don't have to touch it. But.
No, we can touch it. We could talk about it. I think it's worth talking about. I think the Margaret Sanger bit, I didn't know enough about it. So I actually, after the interview, I spent some time digging in on it and I read about it. And even that was just like, there's more context to it. Like I didn't know Margaret Sanger was like, during the 1930s, people didn't have abortions. There couldn't be abortions during that time. Abortions were illegal. They were doing back alley abortions. So she was talking about contraceptives or whatever the case may be. And one of the things that I thought was interesting in an article that I was reading, and it was published by Planned Parenthood. So like, I'll give that background. Like that piece was published by Planned Parenthood. They mentioned that for a woman in the 1920s, 1930s, like her, that had this opinion, she would speak to anybody that was willing to give her an audience. Yeah,
I think I read that.
So she talked to, even though she talked to the KKK, she also talked to W.E.B. Du Bois. She talked to Martin Luther King. She was talking to Black leaders. And it was the family planning part of it was what she was actually preaching. She wasn't preaching like population control, which is, I think, the topic that a lot of people use when they're trying to misconstrue what her work was. Although other people were saying, like I was also reading, she was a eugenic supporter. And in that context, she was a racist. So like, but 1930s, there's just so many different levels to it, but you need the entire story. And just like that one little blurb that Kanye says on an interview, somebody going to go into a barbershop next, like 2 days from now and be like, oh, this person did this, but they don't have the context. They don't know the whole story.
So this is what upsets. This is what's tricky, right? Because Kanye has all the right to say that, right? And if he does say that on a platform that Margaret Sanger was racist and she had a plan to exterminate the black race or whatever, great. I guess you can write that, right? And to me, someone needs to be able to combat that shitty speech with something that's a lot stronger, right? Okay. And this goes back to when you watch like The Social Dilemma. It's like you're just seeing algorithms that's only going to prove that right. Like if you see Kanye write that this chick was racist, You're going to go Google it, you're going to go look online, and you're only going to see pages that are going to confirm that bias, because that's just how it works, right? You're not going to see a counter argument to that, because the algorithms don't, they put you in silos and they put you in these echo chambers. They don't introduce you to additional ideas outside to what you're already being introduced to. So, yeah, someone can have some crazy ideas about, like, if you want to use Hitler as a example. I don't, who else was out there screaming in the streets or like preaching against him, right? Like, how many people in Parliament were saying, like saying we can't have this man because he's fucking insane, right? You don't, I'm not too well versed in it. I know you probably did your research because you know that Winston Churchill, a bunch of also UK British leaders are going over there. But it's the same thing today. It's just, if there's shitty speech or if there's like people saying that things are just incorrect, then you got to correct it with something more with like correct speech. And you see that with, you know, Facebook and Instagram, and then also YouTube. They do have their little blurbs at the bottom saying, hey, these are some facts about certain things. This is why it's wrong. And I think that's a step up, but I think it still needs to be less robotic because it's being dictated by these social media platforms that people aren't trusting anymore.
Right.
They don't have the best. They don't have the best. They say they have our best interests. They don't have our best interests at heart, because at the end of the day, they try to keep us on the platform as much as they can, and they feed us information that we want to see.
Right.
But we still need to have conversations elevated, and this is why we're having this debate or talk today, because we want to be able to have like an open dialogue rather than just an echo chamber on things that we agree on, right? Because that's not really pushing any conversations forward.
Yeah, most definitely. I think, like you mentioned, you talked about like the confirmation bias, you talk about the echo chambers, and you talk about even the fact checkers and people that are fact checking on these platforms. But the challenge right now, especially in society today, like, people don't care about facts. Like, they'll dispute facts. Like, people will, like, somebody says 1 + 1 = 2, they're gonna be like, nah. Like, there's people that say that, like, the earth is flat, they faked the moon landing. Like, we could be like, yo, I can show you the evidence that it's not. Like, I can tell you that the earth is wrong. Still people are going to do that because people today have a worldview, and sometimes they're just not willing to change that, because changing that worldview, like, it means that they got to give up a level of control that they don't necessarily want to.
Time and control. The issue is people make these ideas and concepts a part of the identity. So when you make it a part of your identity, it's like, I can't let this go because this is part of my identity.
Who I am, but that's what I mean by control. Like, if I can't let you as an individual come into my space, my home, my world, and change everything that it is that I believe. Because if I change everything that I believe, what else is wrong, right? So now I have to give up. And some people, it's exactly what you're saying, and then some people just don't want to be wrong. It's a pride thing. It's an ego thing. I can't give up or be open to the fact that there's a chance that I could be wrong. I think that's a huge part of it. Somebody said Earth is flat. Oh my God.
Pluto is a planet.
You're right.
And so I think we've beaten this topic like a bloody corpse. We can let's move to you disagreed about Black History Month and stripping the black from new businesses. So that was the bullet you sent over. Can you elaborate on that one?
All right. So Kanye was talking about at the end, and this is kind of like there's a mixed bag here. So, like, this is the tricky part, like you mentioned. He said that he wants to do away with Black History Month. Like, he wants Black Future Month, Black Possibility Month, whatever that is, right? Whatever his vision for that is, that's what he wants to do. He's tired of hearing people talk about the new Black businesses and, like, all that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting that he could say that, because he's in a position where he's outside of that. Like, he's past that, like he's not just a rapper. But from my perspective, it's still needed, because right now you have a lot of figures and people that are in power that are how you say, they're trying to strip that away from us in general, right? They want people to not understand Black people understand what their history is. And the history doesn't need to be limited to just like slavery and all the pain and like all that other stuff. And I think that's what he's thinking about when he says that. But there's a lot of misinformation or a lack of understanding of like what our successes were, you know, like the ideas that were stolen from us, like who are the leaders that we've had. Like there's so much more to Black history, and stop calling it Black history and start calling American history.
There you go, Morgan Freeman.
He does that, right? Like you do that, that's better, right? Like you talk about, you're not talking about this like 28-day little microscope of like trying to limit, you know,
the shortest month,
all hundreds of years of Black impact to the growth of this country just into the month of February. It needs to be taught. But this is all we have right now. Black history should be expanded. That's why I think it should be. It should be expanded, and we should be part of the overall history of, you know, the country and the world, whatever the case may be. That should be discussed. But right now, just to kind of like remove whatever like our foothold is, you know, like what little that we actually have, and start from nothing, you know, like that's the part that I disagree with the most. Even with Black businesses, like you see, if you think about like you know, I work in tech space, so like I work with a lot of startups. You look at tech, you got only about 2% of tech today. People that can write checks to invest in businesses are Black people. You got lenders, bankers, they're not offering loans to Black businesses, like, or Black business owners, because they don't understand the problems that we have in our society or in our community. Because most people that are innovators, they set out to solve a problem, but the problem that they set out to solve is always going to be the problem that's going to be the most immediate problem that they can see. So if you are a Black business owner, or somebody, you live in the hood, or you came from the hood, you look at the problems in your community and say, I want to fix that. But I need money to get started to do that. If you're a bank, you're like, okay, but I live out in Montauk, or I don't know, I'm not shitting on these different places, or Greenwich. Yeah. You're far removed from any of these things, so you don't understand what these problems are. You don't see the money in it. You don't see the value in actually doing it. It becomes an advocacy issue for you. Like, oh, like I don't want to advocate for solving these things. And then you see these people that are in a position of power to actually provide capital or be agents for change for Black businesses, or even people in color in general. They could do it, but they choose not to because they don't see the value in it, right? It's not dollars and cents to them. They don't see the dollar signs to them. They see it as charity. And that happens way too much. So when I see like, you know, like a Black owned business, like, and I find out that maybe like the CEO or somebody in the C-suite is a Black person, I'm clapping for those people, right? I'm celebrating that, because there's too much history that passed by where Black people have innovated, they've created, and haven't gotten credit. If Kanye were to write a song or produce a beat and Taylor Swift stole it, he would be mad as hell if he didn't get that credit. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from.
He was mad at Just Blaze for copying him on Sister Blueprint.
Yeah. And then I had to, like, I saw Just Blaze he had a comment afterwards. He was like, ain't nobody copy anybody. I saw Jay said the exact same thing.
Yeah,
like they jumped into the frame. I think that might have been the alcohol talking. I think that was just like kind of ego from Kanye, maybe.
I think you can say that he's like that. That's him. Like, he believes that, wholeheartedly believes that. He believes all of that, especially when he gets on the phone and texts everyone, "I'm richer than all of you."
Right.
He means it. It might sound like a joke, they're laughing, but I'm like, that man wouldn't be laughing. When he wrote that, he probably wasn't laughing. No. But to get back to the topic, I think we looked at this in two totally different ways. Black History Month, I think we should do away with that, of course, and just have like, it's because it's American history. That's how I see it, and we should have it intermingled with the history that we teach anyway, because at the end of the day, it is American history, right? Stripping the Black from new businesses. So I hear you. You're talking about like the pipeline of like loans and money that can be given to black businesses and stuff like that. That's an issue. I think that we're not. I think we're very under invested in. We're very underdeveloped from that standpoint, especially when it's like what's the percentage of venture capital money that goes to black businesses in general?
It's
It's
usually
like
like less than 2%.
less than 2%. Correct. And I agree with all those points. Like I agree with all those points. I think, and my perception of what he was saying is just like we need to be more black futuristic, right? And then we need to stop. We need to strip the title black from businesses, and in terms of saying like, oh, this is a black owned business, like, oh, this is the first black cannabis company in Wisconsin. Oh, this is the first. I don't know, coffee shop in New Jersey owned by a black person. And to me, like I always looked at that as what does it matter if that person is black, right?
Mhm.
Like when I was growing up, I've never looked at my blackness in a way that was like inferior to anything else. I felt like I can do whatever the fuck I wanted, right? As long as I put my heart and soul to it. So when someone just says, you know, oh wow, a black. This is the first like black blah 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 blah. It's like the issue isn't because the person's black. That's not why we're so shocked. Wow, a black person was able to do this. It's not. To me, it sounds like inferiority in some type of way, and it's implied. And then when people tell me or say, we need to invest or we need to shop at black businesses, it's just like no no no. It's not a fucking charity, right? Is the business itself quality? Like, is it up to great standards? Like, is it giving you good like service and shit like that? Are we, if you go in there, are they welcoming, etc.? And I look at those things when I go into businesses, and I'm just like, that's a high quality business. It's not that's a black business I need to invest in. Like, there's that company. I don't know if you've been to it in like Bed-Stuy. It's like Brooklyn Blend.
Mhm.
Like I love that restaurant. It's one of my favorite restaurants to go to when I'm like in that area getting a haircut. And it's the best service that you ever find in there. And I don't look at it as like, yo, this is a black business. It's like this is a fantastic business. So when people say things like tagging that word onto it, I think I personally would like to have it done away with, especially if I create my own coffee shop in like Jamaica, Queens. It's just like no no no. Like I want kids to see that my actions are speaking for me. Don't look at the title they slapped on me as having a black business. Like I'm legit started this, and I look just like you. There's nothing that can stop you from creating this. It's not it's a surprise that I'm black that I'm doing it. It's just I thought about it and I brought it to fruition. So I see what he says about slapping, like doing away with it. I hear him, and then also the black futuristic piece. It's like we're clapping for these things, and we can. I mean, this could be not controversial, but this could be, um, I'd say someone could view this as like I could probably just be being mean or something like that. But yeah, you can own, like I can have my own black coffee shop, and that's great. Like I'm the first black person on a coffee shop, but when you look outside of like the black community, what people are actually doing, like when you look at like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, and you look at all these other people and what they're investing in and what they want to like build out. They're so far in the future that we're not looking that far out there. Like we're still focused on, I'm trying. Even if you look at Kanye, it's like, I'm building a clothing brand. It's like, where's our where's our space programs, right? Like where are the people investing in like the AIs and stuff like that? We need to be telling their stories more, rather than just looking at the stuff that's so close to our culture, right? This person got a brand sponsorship from fucking Balenciaga, or this person's building this luxury clothing brand, or this person's building these like necklaces and stuff like that. It's like, how are we building for the future that's going to actually solidify us out there? So you have, like, where are our car companies? We don't have any of those. I don't think people are even thinking about those to begin with. And yes, that goes back to the conversation around investment and stuff like that. But still, it's like, when are we going to start looking towards that, rather than looking at, oh, this is the first black business in this field, in this area.
So I think you bring up a good point, but I would challenge that and say they exist. These businesses already exist, but you don't hear about them because
Correct.
they don't get funded and they don't get support. So when there's like campaigns and actions and they're saying like, hey, support black businesses. So like there's support black businesses. So like these companies can actually grow to be at the level of like an Elon Musk, like a Tesla or SpaceX, things like that. There are plenty of actual businesses that are in like tech space that like in autonomous cars. They get funded, but they don't get funded at the level that their white male owned counterparts are getting funded. Because it's not just like in this entire space when we're talking about business, it's not just black people. There's like it's not just black owned. There's also female owned and female founded like companies. There's minority owned companies. The government's part of this too, like making sure that people of color that own businesses or found businesses, they're getting some sort of dollars actually their way. But the reality and the gross reality is the vast majority of the movers and shakers are going to be white men, right? Correct. Like that's just the reality. Yep. So when there's campaigns and actions and saying like, hey, here's press so I can give you notoriety to, or just like a shout out to a black owned business and like, hell, this is the first black owned business in this area. Like that's supposed to be like, use Google to like have that be like the first thing that kind of hits the top. And then whoever wants to support that business is throwing dollars that way. There's plenty of times that like sometimes like I'll see a black owned business, and if I like the product that they're creating, I'll buy from them just to support, because I know how hard it was for them to even break through that ceiling to get that business started. Correct. So I think about it from the standpoint of you need to be, like you need to start from somewhere, like Elon Musk didn't start, like SpaceX and Tesla out of nowhere. Like he started off like PayPal, with PayPal, right? Like him and a whole bunch of people, like they learned how to do like a payment app, like, and it started off like as nothing. Bezos was selling books, like out of like starting off with nothing. Like Kanye started off as a musician. Now he had a clothing line. His brand is worth or valued over $6.6 billion. When he wants to do something else, if he wants to, whatever it is, maybe he will do that. Which kind of, I don't know if you want to rebut that or if there's anything that you want to add, because like us talking about Bezos and Elon Musk kind of leads to the next point. So that's a good segue. Yeah, it is. So you said he had a utopian comment about homelessness and solving world problems. Yeah. Discuss that. All right, so I may agree. I mean, because the thing is with Kanye, and I can preface this conversation, he thinks of things, and you can debate it, but like, he thinks of things as like a CEO. Like he doesn't think of it from like a solution standpoint. He just says grandiose things. Like even going back to what I mentioned about like, oh, I'm gonna build orphanages for women who want a plan A or something like that. I'm like, fine, but some women don't want to go through 9 months, have a baby, and then just give them over to you. That's very traumatic. It's traumatic carrying a baby that you're not gonna keep for 9 months, and then just giving it to some random orphanage, and you're never gonna see that baby again, probably, right? So that's very traumatic. Like you didn't think that through, but you think that, yeah, women shouldn't abort because at the end of the day they should just give me their babies because I'm gonna have a really nice orphanage for them. Like you didn't even think about the person who is carrying that baby for 9 months. So it was like a very man like response to that, and I don't think he thought that through. But then again, I feel like a lot of these things he's not going to think through, like homelessness, right, or solving world problems. It's very surface level shit. But you can provide your thoughts on that. Even on like the abortion piece, the thing that, and the orphanage piece, you also got to realize that there's certain, not all women are pro-choice. That's something that I had to learn. Like there were leaders in, like governors in the South, women, just like, okay, we're gonna strip like some of these like funding for these clinics and things of that nature. It's like half of the country is so divided, especially here and abroad, like globally, on a number of different issues. And I
Yep.
think one of the things that we as people tend to believe, especially like based off of what we see on social media or what we hear on the news or what we hear on everything, like we all think that everybody thinks this one way, right? Whatever is quote unquote progressive, is how everybody's, like the vast majority of people think. And I don't think that's the case. People are mixed. The vast majority of people are mixed. They touch from all the different sides, but and that's another thing. There are different sides. Like it's not just two, but we're kind of fooled into this thinking that we need to be in one camp or the other. And that's what pits us against each other. And then we don't have a dialogue and we can't have a conversation. But the piece on like the utopian comment of, you know, like him being homeless, he was talking about him being homeless. It was like, you know, like people tell me I have to have a house, and a house is, you know, a way of controlling me. And they started talking about, you know, like rich people, like solving those problems and things of that nature. The second interview, he actually dives into that though. Like he talks about it. Like the first interview, he says the utopian comment, that first comment that I first sent to you in the email, but then the second one, he talks about like Elon wanted to go to Mars, and Kanye goes like, I care more about what's happening here, like what's happening on this planet, right? Like I want to fix the ills that are happening here. And I think, no, what were you gonna say?
No, I said yep.
So the way that I think about it is there's a lot of people that look towards the Bezos, the Musk, the Gates, and all these other people to be influential or impactful in some of these problems, to solve some of these problems like world hunger, like homelessness and things of that nature, because they have resources and they have vision. If they didn't have vision to build a rocket ship, even though they're not astronauts, they're not physicists, nothing like that, and actually accomplish these things, they're pouring their resources into some of these things that are trivial, that they might not even see. They're old, so like they might not actually ever see Mars, right? But they're building this stuff, and they're like, you know what? Like I want to go there, and I'm going to terraform Mars, and blah 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 blah. But you could fix or you know, like at least make an impact on climate change in the United States, or not in like the United States, on the globe. You can help, you know, like feed millions of people in a certain country, or make food a little bit more accessible. You can build out some rich people are building out cities right now, like in the desert, and you know, like out west. Like Kanye is talking about, like he wants to build a city in Wyoming. Rich folks and the people that are extremely wealthy, they have resources that are bigger than some countries, right? I remember back in either middle school, high school, someone told me that Bill Gates could buy Bolivia. Like, you know how crazy that is? Like, for one man to be able to own so much and have so much power, have so much money that they can buy a country. Like, and not a small country. Bolivia is pretty big to buy a country. So when you have those resources and you have those vision, that level of vision, I think people that don't have it and don't have that those resources, don't have that vision, what they want you to do is to apply your resources and vision to kind of fix some of the stuff that billions of people are struggling with.
Well, so crazy. Yeah, go finish.
But the one thing I'll say as kind of like a negative about that is you can't please everybody, right? So even with Gates, like Gates was involved with like the you know, like the immunization stuff, and like working on like diseases and things like that. And once people he'd been doing it for years. The foundation had been doing it for years. But once certain things kind of took off on social media, all of a sudden you get into the conspiracy theorists, the 5G people. It's Bill Gates trying to take over your mind and program you and all this other stuff. So I can understand why wealthy people might not want to go out on a limb, because it does put them a bigger spotlight on them, because their failures become a little bit more apparent. And then like people really do start digging into their personal lives, but people do start trying to destroy them, because let's face it, somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. right? Even in some of the problems that happen in the world where climate change, for example, like the energy like business, like oil people are going to be like, I'm mad. I don't want this. I don't want wind farms. I don't want people using solar panels. Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies, there's people, that system can change the lives of a lot of other people, but it's also going to impact the lives of other people as well, that in a negative way. Like, so there's always going to be a give and take.
Yep.
That's my thoughts there.
So I guess I'll ask you a question. Do you believe super wealthy people should solve world problems?
I do. I think they should commit the resources to make it happen. Like, I don't think that Elon Musk can, not to say that not to minimize his ability, but I think that they should be committing resources to do it. It's not their responsibility. It's their money. They can do whatever they want with it, right? But for folks that, if you have that big of a brain, you're blessed with that level of vision and that much resources, which, in my opinion, I gave you. That's my thought.
So this is my thing. Right?
You don't become rich if I don't spend my dollars. I'm a regular person. I made you rich. That's the way I think.
Yes, and I believe that as well. But I made you rich by giving you a service that you need and making your life easier.
I didn't need Amazon. I could have still went to the store. I chose to buy it.
If Amazon crashed tomorrow and wasn't around for like 2 months, people will lose their shit. But I'm gonna say this, right? Some people aren't meant to solve all problems, right? Like, yeah, you could say throw resources at it and then let's just see what happens. But when I look at Elon, I'm like, this guy is not the most emotionally like empathetic person in the world. That's just not in his wheelhouse. So why would I think or look to him to solve very human issues or understand the insights of it? Like, I remember when he said, he was on Rogan talking about his Neuralink, where he's like, oh, you can have a brain that can think so fast that you can solve issues once we install it into your brain, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you'll be able to get whatever job, learn whatever language, make millions of dollars, whatever. That's his grandiose thing. And Rogan just says, yeah, but who can afford that? Just the super rich. They're just going to use that to get super rich and leave out and it's going to be a classism issue. And he was like, oh, no, you can just get a loan and then you get it installed in your brain and then you'll be able to get it. And it's just like, not everyone has fucking access to a loan. Not everyone has credit scores to do that. And that's why that's going to further just make it disparate, have it like the wealth gap, higher disparity in the wealth gap. So to me, I'm just like, do you really want that man solving those issues? Or do you just look at it that he has a lot of money, he needs to use it? Or are there issues such as homelessness that you're not too privy about because you just see it as an annoyance in your city, and you don't take the extra step to look at how government is actually operating and allocating the resources that you give them to solve those issues? How are they actually using your tax dollars to solve homelessness? Is it mostly going to salaries, or is it going through to like drug rehab programs? Are they actually giving houses to people that are clean rather than just circling them through the system? Are they giving them proper mental health care and stuff like that? The things that we've paid these governments and the people we put in power, we put them in power, right? And we give them tax dollars, even whether we like it or not. We have a choice to give money to Elon and stuff like that because he's providing a service that's running as efficiently as it is. We didn't have a contract with him. We don't have a social contract with a Bezos, with a Elon Musk, or with a Bill Gates. These people are going out of their way to do it for reasons, tax write-offs, like God complexes and all this other stuff that they may have. But also, I have a social contract with my governor. I have a social contract with my mayor, the public servants in my neighborhood. I pay you taxes, you fix these issues. So now, instead of looking at Bezos to fix homelessness, it's just like, okay, has my government done everything they can do to do this, right? And that's where it gets to the point where it's just like, why are we looking for billionaires, even though we don't trust them? We say things like eat the rich or the rich are evil, but you trust them to solve world health issues. You trust them to end world hunger? How? Why? What do you think they're going to put in the food? Like, what if you don't trust them? Why would you trust them to feed billions of people on this planet? It's just it's more of like a helpless thing. I think when we ask them to do these things, it's just like we're throwing our hands in the air. Like, you have lots of resources, you do it. But it's just like, why don't we look at the people who we have a social contract with to fix some of these issues? And Elon, what's so funny, what he did, he was like, if I sell my stock or if I give you X amount of dollars and you can show me a legit plan that you're going to solve world hunger, I'll give it to you. And the guy from, I think it was a guy from like the UN, never responded back.
He did.
Did he gave him a plan?
So he responded, his response was $6 billion will not solve world hunger. But what it will do is provide resources like irrigation systems to famine-stricken like countries and things of that nature. There's like, I think 40 million people in the world are currently starving because of like famine. I think that was the number that I read. But what these countries don't have, you know, is they don't have roads. Like it could build a road, like something simple as that, like to make sure that, or a pipeline to make sure that the water is coming with desalination like systems. I'm throwing out a whole bunch of big words. So like
these things that Bill Gates works on.
I think he works mostly on like the he was working on like more so like the pandemic type of stuff, like the actual like disease things. But I think his foundation also works on some of these different things too.
They do. I believe they do. And then there's also people hate him. I know Lupe was talking about this before. It was like Monsanto. Like people
like
yeah, they'd say like, oh, you know, we don't trust these seeds, like it's like GMO food, et cetera, but it's like, where else are we going to grow enough food or have enough food to like feed this many people at this scale? Right now, we don't have a way to feed at that much scale. I don't think we even utilize our food systems in the U.S. efficiently, where there's a lot of food waste.
Yeah,
but
there's a lot of food waste in this country.
There's a lot of food waste where I think maybe he doesn't, like some of these billionaires, they don't have the brain for it. I don't think a lot of people have a brain to solve some of these issues. Like,
I think they want to. I think they, like I said, I think it's an issue of you do put yourself in the spotlight for failure. You know, especially when it's an issue that has this much of a social impact, because there's just so much more at stake. Because you said, you know, like, do you want Elon? Like, I'm sorry, like, I hope he never sees this. Well, maybe he can. I don't care. Like, I hope he does see it, right? Because he might feel like we're singling him out. I don't think he would care either. But I remember, I am a fan. So one of the things that I did like about him was, and we only got about 30 seconds remaining, when a couple of years ago, when there was like a bunch of people, like miners, they were trapped in like this cave and it was flooding. He was the one that said like, oh, I'm going to come up with a solution to fix this.
In Chile.
And Elon was like, oh, I'm going to build some like submarine that people can use to get these people out or something like that, right? Like some small submarine to get these people out or something like that. So there are moments that the wealthy want to use. They want to like use their resources or their capital to fix their problems. But I do agree with you on when it comes to like the social contract that we have with government. The challenges with like working with like governments, that sometimes like it's just too contentious right now. People will literally work against each other in order to kind of further like their own ambitions, right? Like there's so much good that can be done in the world, and some people feel as though there's no benefit to me helping these other people, right? So like that's the thing that that kind of ticks me off sometimes. Like there was this one politician, he was actually like during Obama's tenure, right? When Obama was president, the Republicans made the leader of their committee, like the GOP committee, Michael Steele, right? Michael Steele was done with that. He didn't have that job anymore. He became like a talking head, and he was talking about on like Meet the Press or something like that. He was talking about like how he always wanted to go into Harlem and talk to the black people there And if you will, as a Republican, try to get people to start voting for Republicans, but the only way that you can do that as a Republican is to go into these communities, Black communities, and communities that typically don't vote for you, and listen to their problems.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to do that. Like his colleagues and his other, like, didn't want to do that because it didn't serve them, right? It didn't serve their interests. Like, what is me as somebody that's working in a completely different capacity, working to kind of like solve some of these other problems, like that really, these aren't my constituents. These aren't my they don't have the exact same, I don't know, outlook on life, things like that. There's no like shared value system, things like that. I'm not going to go there to listen to their problems. Sometimes you have to literally be present, like in order for you to make some sort of impact. Mm-hmm. And our politicians don't always agree with that, and they don't always believe that. They don't believe that it's important for them to be present in order to make an impact. They rather be separated. They rather play us against each other.
Yeah, and I hear that, but from that standpoint, from a government standpoint, it's, let's just take New York for instance. Like this is a blue state, no matter how you look at it. When you're elected, you're elected. Why is homelessness still raving like it was in like the 70s and the 80s, right? My father, when he first came to New York, I think in like the late 80s, when we first moved to like the country, he came to America like in the 70s, moved to New York and like ran some of the homelessness programs throughout the city. And he said literally the same issues that he experienced in the 80s and the 90s are the same issues that are going on today. Like nothing has changed. The same programs are in place, but they're not innovative. They're not effective, right? And all our taxes are still rising, right? But nothing's getting fixed here. So to me, it's just like, why would we look outside of this ineffective system? Because we're electing ineffective people. We're electing people who aren't innovative enough, but we have a social contract with them. But then we're looking at someone like an Elon Musk or something. It's like, these motherfuckers could be fucking evil. I don't know. They literally could not care, and they cannot care because
you need disruptors. Like that's the whole. Like Elon's a disruptor. You need a disruptor. Bureaucracy is like the most ineffective things in general. You're always going to look at bureaucracy and see things not working. How, like, there's people arguing over like within certain laws or bills that are sitting in Congress over like, oh, like I don't like the fact that this is 10, but I would make it 9, and then people arguing over that. Like bureaucracy is very ineffective in that way, and that's why like a disruptor, like the wealthy people that have resources that operate outside of this social construct that is government that we basically created and said like, hey, you guys rule. If you can do things outside of that and make an impact, then do so. And like I worked with that homeless population at one point too. So like right after school, I worked with those folks too. Mm-hmm. A big issue with just that is the fact that the programs that are created, yes, they're ineffective, but then also the people have problems that are that expand far past like just like having a home. Like if you're homeless.
But this is my issue though. We don't address those things. Like as a consultant, right? We're not taught to solve symptoms. We're taught to solve the root cause, right? Homelessness is just a symptom of a root cause that is probably maybe your mental health, right? Maybe you actually suffer from schizophrenia and stuff like that. You can overdose. Alcoholism, right? Why do you have alcoholism, right? Maybe you ran through your family, maybe you had a poor upbringing. We're not addressing these core truths and these core issues that are going to actually solve the problem itself. And we don't talk about it like that. And people just see people on the street, and they just become invisible to them now. So it's not even like we see them as people, we just see them as problems laying around, right? And going back to what you mentioned about like, we need innovators. It's unfortunately, if you look at like the past 2 presidents we had, and I don't want to look at it as if I don't want to look at it as like on a federal level, because I don't think that's really helpful. I like looking at things from a local level. But Obama was an innovator, right? He was a kind of like an outsider Trump was definitely one too at the end of the day, but that's as you said, the system is still corrupt. They're not going to solve what they need to solve, and we're not going to hold them to it because they're so siloed. But I still think, like from like a city level, if you look at homelessness and issues like that, like that could be solved fairly easily. Not easily, but if you just have someone who's a problem solver who wants to look at things like that, then I think that's possible. Especially like a Andrew Yang. I don't want to bring him up again, but he looked at things from a way that a politician wouldn't, right? He had fresh ideas. It's just he wasn't popular. That was the issue about him. People weren't able to like cling on to like those those solutions that he provided. But that's the kind of thinking that needs to be presented in the politics today. Not looking at Elon Musk like, wow, you can build a rocket, but at the end of the day, like that's not really helping anyone. You could look at someone like Tesla, like actually like Nikolai Tesla. He probably just wanted to like have lights and stuff like that, but it was based off of what he did that we were able to have like electric cars. So maybe he did that in the short term. He didn't see electric cars in the future, but the shit that these billionaires are working on now, who knows what the impact's going to be down the free money makes people lazy. Anyways, who knows what's going to happen like down the line. That's why I still think it's very important the work that they do. I just don't count on them to like really bail us out on shit. I feel like you just have to be a passionate person. Like the people are asking, it's just like, what have you done for your community? Like even when you look at Dave Chappelle, like Dave Chappelle, he said, you know, COVID's busting my ass. Like my community's out of work. Let me do a comedy show here and hire people in my community so that they could be able to feed themselves and feed their family. And that was something that was extremely important, that he did what he could with his resources for his locale, right? No one's doing that. Everyone's trying to look at these grandiose things. We have to solve homelessness throughout the country. Why don't you solve homelessness for your block or for your like district, and talk to your district like your district elected officials and see what they can actually do, and see where your tax dollars are going and how they're viewing problems. If they're viewing problems wrong and if they're not identifying the problem correctly, then you can have a conversation with them. But I just don't see those things happening. I think naturally we just look at money as like the great equalizer, right? But if I told you something crazy like $400 million goes into a homelessness budget in New York City to like solve homelessness every single year, if you heard that, you'd be like, yo, where's that money going? And if you found out a lot of that money is going to people's pockets, or it's getting spent on shit that just hasn't been working for the past 30 years and it's ineffective spending, you'll feel a certain type of way about that, right? And then that makes you not look at Elon and Bezos and the other billionaires as, wow, this person needs to solve our problems. It's more like, okay, we're not doing something correctly here, and we need to be able to hold these guys' feet to the fire rather than depending outside of like our government, who we have a social contract with.
So I would say the only thing I would counter that with is you might not necessarily need those individuals to throw money at the problem, but you could take their to help solve the problem. So if they are disruptors, if they are people that would come in like you said, Andrew Yang, who has like different ideas and ideas that seem more extreme than everything else that anybody else is saying. You have these ideas, have those individuals kind of be the ones that are pushing the envelope, challenging their assumptions, and moving them forward, like helping move those things forward because they have the experience, they have the vision, they have the expertise. So that part of it, I think, is important and necessary. And not to say that every politician is, ineffective and not trying to solve those problems. Like I've had the benefit of actually having relationships with like my local, like leaders, like they've impacted my life as an individual, like become like citizen in this country. Like I've had to have conversations with my local congressperson to get to this point, right? Like that's like a very vulnerable moment for me to be able to say that. Me to ask for one of those individuals to help, they made it happen, right? And to this day, I still talk to them. Like I talk to them online. I see them, the ones that are like active. They're in Brownsville. They're in Crown Heights. They're on the street, are trying to actually affect the lives of like their constituents. As far as like the money is concerned, it comes from the top down, and the way, like I said, bureaucracy is ineffective. it's because of the way that the money is flowing, right? Like the way that the money is like kind of traveling down from the governor's office and then being issued by this like office, and then it has to go through this process in order for this to get approved, and this has to get a stamp, and then you gotta write this grant, or some of the money gotta be allocated to this company and this nonprofit and this blah blah blah. All of that is where the money kind of gets separated, because at the end of the day, like the government doesn't have like the manpower to make the changes. They hire out other people to do it,
Right.
with the understanding or the hope that they would be the ones that are actually making change. We as individuals don't always hold them accountable because we don't look.
But we're
Like,
illiterate. We're politically illiterate people. Like people are politically illiterate, especially how things just run. The average person can't tell me how much money is spent on homelessness issues in New York City. I can't tell you that. Like
Right.
no one can. No one has insights into the budget or are sitting on budget committees to figure out what's happening. So they do shovel that money out, but then what do you think is going to happen if you take money from Bill Gates to fix it? You don't think that's going to be compromised in some type of way? Who's going to run that? Because at the end of the day, you got to keep in mind, these people have no time. Like Elon Musk has no time. He runs SpaceX, he runs Tesla, he had Solar City. He has no time. And to tell him, all right, man, can you help us solve homelessness throughout the world or world hunger? It's like, who do you think I am?
Bro, Gates is doing his foundation.
Gates left Microsoft and he focuses 100% on the Gates and Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation, whatever. Like he left Microsoft to focus on that, right? So that's one thing. It's just like he has the time to do it. Bezos, yeah, right, you know, he stepped down from Amazon. Maybe he's interested in that, but you also got to keep in mind he's an egomaniac.
Space too.
Huh?
He wants to go to space too.
He wants to go to space too. You can see that he's cracked out on like testosterone. Like that dude, like he doesn't care about what people are talking about with him as well. You can see that. Like look at the chick that he got after he like got a divorce from his wife. He doesn't give a fuck. Like why are we looking at him to solve things? It's just like it's not gonna happen. It's easy to say though, because at the end of the day, the average person, the masses were like, we're going to look at them like, yeah, why does he have so much money? For what reason? But it's like, yeah, he created something that's of a service to us, and we made him that, right? You don't have to support him, but don't think he has to support us by like solving these issues that we want them to solve. That's just not feasible. It would be nice if they did. Like what Bill Gates is doing is pretty nice, but then look how they're chewing his ass up. Like, bro, you're injecting our babies with microchips. It's like, what? And then just like, oh wait, wasn't he with like that dude who like hung himself in the cell? Like, blah blah blah. I don't trust them. It's just like, why would you put yourself out there in the first place? But I digress. I think we've beaten that dead horse.
Yeah.
For a while, but I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover. I know there are things you agree with, but
Yeah,
we're
is there anything that you think, you know, like anything that stood out that was there was a number of different things that we agreed with, you know, like Kanye on. Is there anything that you would say, I don't know, that kind of like stuck out to you?
that I agreed or disagreed with.
That you agreed with?
That I agreed with. There's a lot that I agreed with that he was talking about. The cancel thing, I always felt like shit, like the cancel culture and everything around that was quite. Cancel them. You can't cancel us from our own culture,
Oh,
right?
you froze.
I froze.
No, you're back. You're back. You're good.
Yeah, it was like the conversation that he was having about like you can't cancel us from our own culture and stuff like that. That's one thing that I really clung to. He said a lot. I'm trying to remember what else he spoke about. The ego and anger thing, I really like that.
Thing I thought was good.
Funny, he has one of the biggest egos out there, which he always had, right? But it's funny when he talks about like how he used to bite, like how you bit Drake's ear and stuff like that. Like that was just like it was nice hearing him be open about something like that. Just like, you know, yeah, I did that. Like I did that despicable thing because I felt like I was being cheated in some type of way. But the class system as well. So everything that we spoke about, especially around race, I do think that that's like a bigger issue than race itself. It's like classism,
Hmm.
right? It's like we in America, I think, even just throughout the country, throughout the world, I think classism is going to be like the next frontier, the next challenge for us, especially when people start saying how. I mean, people are already talking about eat the rich and stuff like that. That's a little extreme for me, but I do think that like that classism is going to be like the next big issue for us to really focus on, and then that's where the unity is going to be because you can't really divide us if we're apart together in a class, right? If you can divide us by race because something's so surface, but when it's class and we share the same issues and things like that, we can actually come together and solve a lot more issues and also combat a lot more evil out there. That's very blanket for me, but what about yourself?
I think that's a good point. I do agree with like everything that you just said, like the classism piece. I thought one of the things that he talked about was like the phobia around mental health. You know, like the work that we do with Hair Club, just like talking about that, like the suicide rates that you see with people that um, deal with kind of like the ills of social media, like body dysmorphia, all that stuff. I thought that was actually, he was pretty spot on with that. I also thought, even though he was always talking about, like, he always would go back to talk about like his relationship with Kim, I thought it was important, especially in the second interview, when he started talking about like not letting other people into your relationship. You know, like there was other people, no Kyle, not the Kanye 2024 piece. I didn't like that. But I did think that him talking about like the other people that insert themselves into your own relationship, your marriage, whatever the case may be, um, that's something that, you know, like you gotta put a stop to if you are in some sort of relationship. It should only be between two people.
I mean, for you, Keegan, that's easy for you because you have Tori. But for him, coming from him, I'm just like, yo, bro.
I mean,
Like
like
the biggest stars in the world.
based on their brand. So like there's too many people that are already close to them. But
Yeah,
but for the average person,
yeah.
that's it. I think for like outside of celebrities, there's a lot of individuals that a lot of relationships fail because, you know, of other people that don't really belong in the relationship are out there putting in their 2 cents. They're in one person's ear and the other person's ear, and it's detracting from actually you solving problems because now you're having like it's 3, 4, 5 people that you're actually having a the house people got to go. Yeah, exactly. You can't actually have a strong relationship if you got to deal with all these outside forces that are involved in it, or involving themselves. So I thought that was actually a good point. And I thought that was a vulnerable moment from him. And the other thing that I did think that I thought was interesting from the second interview, I had to write the quote down. He was saying something about, he was talking about the OnlyFans thing. Like he was like how he bootlegs OnlyFans, but he said after that, I thought that was funny. Like, you gotta out yourself too. But but I thought it was funny that he said that I thought not funny, but I thought it was insightful that he said that men give up control and power for desire. I thought that was actually a really interesting piece. Like they give up control and power to women just for desire. I thought that was actually really that was interesting. So
Kyle mentioned, can we address him talking about the neglect from Democrats? I think, did we cover that a little bit though?
we talked a little bit about it. We talked about it a little bit. I think if I'm gonna add, and this is just my own personal opinion about it, the two-party system is flawed, right? And I think Kanye wants to hold Democrats accountable, but he's doing it in a way that doesn't serve us, right? Like you serving a party that, or excuse me, like being out in the forefront of a party that wants to restrict voter rights, or you know, like are removing voting stations in black neighborhoods.
He never talks about.
And he doesn't talk about it because he doesn't understand it.
Like, I like Trump. I'm like, all right, man, okay, cool, all right, I get it.
Like, talk to Kanye about gerrymandering. Talk to Kanye about like all these other things that you're seeing. Like he talked about like Governor Greg Abbott. He talked about the governor in Texas a lot. And you watched like once that man got reelected, the way that he redrew districts in that state to take the voice away from Black people from voting. Like, what is, that's censorship, that's control. So like, if you're really against that, then you need to hold that person accountable too. You can't be supporting that individual. Like he's talking about Common and Obama, and it's like, you're just going to do what them folks tell you to do. You doing what them folks are telling you to do as well.
Exactly.
Like you're theirs, right? So like, you're their mouthpiece right now, and he doesn't realize it. So that's what I think.
It would be such a stronger message if he just said we should create a third-party system. Like, this isn't working. Like, have a loud voice like that, because there's a lot of people who have been voicing things like that on that platform, especially like someone like Joe Rogan's like, we need a third party.
We do need a third
party. And like, we have, like, people are already tired now. So like, you just putting on that red hat, I'm like, you're succumbing to what the two-party system wants you to do. You're just going to go to the opposite side.
The way that the two-party system is made is like Kyle's wild. It's the thing is, like, they want people to say, like, look, you have this side or the other side. You agree with more of what I say, so you got to stick with me. Like, forget those other people. And that's what creates the division. If you got two people, two big, like, bulls or juggernauts, whatever you want, like two big powers, and you just got to choose between one or the other, it's easier to manage. It's easier for people to stay in control, because they'll just take turns. And that's the truth of it. Like, at the end of the day, both parties are run by extremely wealthy people and elitists, and they literally just share control. Honestly, that's what it is. There needs to be, people got to wake up and really hold their leaders accountable, and that's the issue. That's the issue I think that most people need to, like, take from it.
On top of that, let's stop being biased then. Like, stop asking Elon, Bezos, Zuckerberg, all these dudes to solve these issues. Why don't you ask the Koch brothers or something like that? What are the Koch brothers like? How come no one's? Is it because you think that they don't care? Well, these guys clearly don't care like that. So at the end of the day, why don't you ask them? I don't know.
Are you reading what the comment?
No comment on that one.
Yeah.
Kyle. That's if he survives another 4 years. If you don't even know.
Right. No, most definitely. Politics is an interesting space right now. And it's, I think the bigger issue is just like it's just accountability and people participating. Like, you don't have a voice if you're not participating.
You're the resident politician here, like political analyst here. I don't know much about politics, and it's like a nasty field that I'd rather not go into like that. You are the professional.
I don't even look at it from like a political lens, man. Like, to be honest, I look at it as, if you want things to change, this is the system that we have. So unless we're willing to, like, change the system, we got to understand how to, like, work with it or put it to work. That's the way I look at it. So this is what we got, right? Like, if you got a beat up Hyundai Sonata and you got to get to work, you driving that Sonata. You can't be like, oh, I want a Rolls. If you can't afford a Rolls, you, like, save up until you could buy one and then drive that to work. But for now, you got this Sonata, you got to cruise with that. So this is what we got. We got a really beat up Sonata in America that runs the country. We got to drive this as far as we can go with it until we figure out how to change it and make it better, and then hold people accountable to it. So
who owns Hyundai? What kind of car is that? Like, it's not Japanese. Is it Korean?
No, Hyundai, I think it's Korean. I think
he's using a Korean car to, like, represent American politics.
That's the best analogy I could come up with at the time. It could be a Ford. All right, make it American.
Scirocco,
like,
or something. I don't know.
No shade to Ford, but or Hyundai or whatever the case may be. But that's just the way that I'm thinking about it. And I don't want people to think that they got to be, I don't know, like, loyal to any particular party either. But, like, you got to hold your leaders accountable, and you got to be, like, use your voice. That's the most important thing. Using your voice is the most important thing.
Absolutely.
If people could just take that, especially young people, and all the change that we actually want will actually happen. But if we're not participating in local elections or talking to our officials within the beat up system that we have, we're not going to be able to get anything moved. Like nothing's going to move forward.
Yeah, everyone's asking about where's Kamala. I don't know where Kamala is, man.
She in DC. I don't know. I don't know where, but I think
They've been hiding her though.
I haven't been watching the news. That's one thing that I will say. I've been reading the news more because the news has been triggering to me. So like one of the things that I haven't been doing is in the last couple of months, I've distanced myself from watching like CNN and MSNBC and all that other stuff. It's the same thing as just like being on social media and just getting that confirmation bias or like them media trying to like get a rise out of you. So that's the way I think about it.
That's why I don't. Yeah, also needs to be a alternative to like mainstream media that people need to flow toward. I think it starts there. Like people can't watch CNN, Fox News, MSNBC because they're just gonna tell you what you want to hear. It's worse than it's just like being on the internet and just having the algorithms give you what you want to listen to or what you want to consume. There needs to be some type of news organization. There are a lot out there, podcasts, and then also just independent news. That's a lot better to watch or listen to than cable news networks. But
I think the bigger issue is actually people need to understand how to identify bias. I don't think people know how to do that yet. Like,
yeah, but once you identify that bias, you'll be like, yeah, I'm not watching this shit no more.
yeah, I think actually the issue with like, let's say like you watch one side versus the other, like actually having a conversation, I think that's more valuable. Like, okay, so I see dudes saying Al Jazeera is like an option. A lot of times I watch like U.S. politics or U.S. news. I watch outside the country. Like I watch BBC, watch like another organization outside, news organization outside the country. I have this feeling because I said BBC, whoever's in the comments is going to say pause. So I'm waiting for, but yeah, I'm waiting for that for sure. But I think Reuters is a good one. Like that's a supposedly biased, a non-biased like news organization. So like whenever I read something or I watch something, the first thing that I try to do is understand where they're coming from and what their bias is before I make an opinion. David, I know who it's you, man. Like,
On that note, let's wrap up.
Yeah, comments are going wild right now. Anyway, but this was a good conversation. We gotta do more of these, and we will be.
For the next one, I told you I want to talk about metaverse.